Generally in this part of the course with natural resources. One thing I wanted you all to notice was when Obama visited Burma on Monday. Yes. What did you think about why Obama and America is interested in coming to Thailand, Cambodia, and Burma right now? What is he interested? Why do you think? What's the interest of America in this region right now? What do you think?
Investment.
Maybe political.
Yeah, investment, but why this region and why right now? What are they thinking about?
Nature resources.
Well, natural resources, everybody's thinking about natural resources, but what in particular is America maybe a little worried about, concerned about?
China.
Okay, you all know, China. So part of America coming to this region is a rivalry with China and a kind of shift about how you want these economies developing. Southeast Asia is developing, all the economies are right now, and there's kind of two models. There's a Chinese method of development and then the Western method of development, and maybe there's a rivalry between the two. So that was one reason Obama wanted to come here. So in the articles I read in the newspaper, said one reason that Burma especially would be interested in America having more interest is because China is overexploiting its resources and they have a problem, even though it's an issue for Burma because China has so much invested in Burma. There has so much money coming into Burma from China, but at the same time it's overdeveloping. It's cutting too many trees. It's taking too much mine from the mines, minerals from the mines. And when they build a hydroelectric plant, most of the electricity is going back to China. So I think, in the American newspaper presses, it was saying maybe one reason Burma should be interested in America is because China is overexploiting. The problem with the overexploitation, it's not just that they're cutting too many trees and taking too many minerals, but very little of the benefit is staying in Burma. One thing about American development, some Western development, is they try to invest in the country where they have the development. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting. One reason Obama coming to this region was an issue about the natural resources in developing this country and the rivalry with China. But today we're going to talk about timber, trees. And this is one issue where China has a really big part to play. But first of all, let's talk about what are trees good for? What do trees do for us? What are forests in Burma good for? Why should we protect them at all? So I have these are different things that forests can do for us. So let's have some of the students read them. Let's start with at the front. Let's read. Reasons forests are good for us.
Forests contribute about 1% to Burma GDP, but it makes up 10% of all Burma's export have increased 1.5 times in the
2000s. That's the year.
2000s. However, the price are dropping because of the
Degraded, that's right.
Of the tree from the unsustainable loading to make more money sustainable.
Okay, then go ahead and read this part too.
Teak
is the tree.
Teak is appreciating $300 million, 9 billion baht, and upward 200 million, 6 billion baht its volume. Burma has 60% of the world tree.
Okay, so let's see if we understand this and any hard words. So forestry is only 1% of Burma's GDP. That doesn't sound like so much, But since forests are involved in so many communities, they're still very important. And it makes up 10% of all of Burma's exports. And the exports are increasing. So it is 1.5 times. That means if you go back to the year 2000, it was half as much exported as exporting now. So more and more trees every year are being exported out. Every year more and more. In the 2000s, that means over the year, from 2000 to 2010, the 2000s are all these years, the exporting are increased. But the prices are dropping. Even though the number of trees going out is increasing, the prices of the trees are dropping. That means the value of a tree, single tree that they sell, the value is going down. And the reason is because, do you know this term degraded quality? Does anyone know the term degraded? Degraded means going down. So, and then quality, you know. So the quality of the trees is going down every year. And the reason why the quality is going down is from the unsustainable logging. So unsustainable means they're cutting down more healthy trees and they're not waiting for healthy trees to regrow. So then they start growing smaller, they start cutting smaller trees and worse trees. And maybe I should draw a picture of this. Can we cover that? So you can get an idea of why the quality of the trees is degrading. If you have like, here's a forest, and then here are two really strong trees, and then we have a little wimpy tree. So what you're supposed to do is cut the two, you cut these two, and then you wait then you wait a long time, and then you wait for these trees to grow back up. So then you always have big, healthy trees to cut. But let's imagine they're cutting more and more of the healthy trees, and they're not waiting for them to grow back up. So then we have two forests. One where there's, 3 healthy trees and 1 wimpy one, and one where they're overcutting the healthy trees, and then there's only these wimpy trees left, and then there's one big. Okay, now the new trees come from seeds, right? So when you have these big trees and they drop the seeds, then they will grow new big trees. So then you have a forest full of the healthy trees. And then this one will grow another wimpy tree. But the more wimpy trees, sick trees that we have in a forest, then when they drop the seeds, the next forest that replaces it will be full of smaller trees. You see? So and then this will drop a seed, and then we'll have only one healthy tree. So you see, after one generation, this forest has all these healthy trees still in there, and after one generation, this tree is now full of the really sick trees. Do you see? So it's when you have unsustainable cutting of the trees, this is the next generation, they will drop a seed. You understand the seeds? Yeah, the seeds lead to the next generation. So when you have unsustainable harvesting of the trees, it speeds up. The more sick trees you have in the forest, the next generation from the seeds will grow even more sick trees. So the forest gets sicker, and the value of the wood goes down every generation, and it just keeps going faster and faster. So this wood is worth much less than this wood. So this is the reason they're cutting more and more trees. There's more and more export every year, more and more export. But the value of the trees every year gets less and less. So this is the problem with unsustainable harvesting. You need people to understand cutting more trees is not good for the long term. You make more money in the first year or two, but over time the value of the trees goes down and down and down, and now you have fewer good forests. So it loses money over time. It's a bad strategy over time. So let's lift that back. So this is the reason exports are going up. but the quality and the money, the value is going down. That's right. And that's because the logging is unsustainable. And then so this is the amount of money that's involved. Teak makes 9 billion baht. What is that in chat? In Burmese chat. Do you know the conversion? Chat. 8,000 billion, 8 trillion. 8 trillion chat. And then so this would be like, then this would probably be like 4 or 5 trillion chat. Okay, so it's a lot of money involved. And then Burma has 60% of the world teak. Burma also has the highest quality of teak. There are other countries that have teak trees, like Malaysia has some plantations, but Burma has the best teak trees in the world. So they're very prized. All right, next, ecotourism.
Ecotourism. Forests are important for ecotourism. The Forest Tour Ministry has created 50 ecotourism sites. 0.6 million tourists visit Burma every year, pointing to this nature.
Okay, so ecotourism. People come to Burma, tourists come to Burma, and inside Burma, tourists visit different parts of the country. They want to see nature. This is what Burma has to offer other people interested in visiting here. Is they want to come to see the forests, these famous teak trees. So protecting the forest is also a part of protecting ecotourism. Okay, that's obvious. Makes sense. Watersheds.
Watersheds. Forest protects watersheds. Slush and ban destroys watersheds. The land's ability to bring water to rivers. Water is lost to rivers and underground sources with huts, villagers and farmers. We also protect from landslides and for mangroves on coast. Inundation.
That's right, inundation. Okay, so we talked about the landslides in a previous class. You know, when you have the mountainside, the trees stop the rainwater from creating a flood that creates the mud coming down. So trees protect the landslides. And then we talked on the coasts when inundation means seawater coming into the land. So when you have a cyclone like Nargis, the mangroves protect all the seawater coming up from the land and flooding. So those are two things. And this is another thing, watershed. Has anyone ever heard of a watershed before?
No.
This is something like a river. This is like the Irrawaddy River or something like that. The watershed is the area around a river. So when it rains, if it rains, so here's a rain cloud and then you have a bunch of rain. When it rains, the watershed means all this water will go into the river, the Irrawaddy River. That's what a watershed does. It brings all the water in the land around it into the river. And it protects this water. But forests are very important for protecting the watershed. If you do not have the forests, then the water does not end up into the river. The water is wasted, is lost. So forests protect this land to bring the water into the rivers. This is called a watershed. Watershed. This land right here that brings the water into the river. This is a river. So forests protect the watersheds and make sure that the water, you can keep the water. If you cut the forests, the water will be lost. If you cut the forests, yeah, well that's what it says here. If you slash and burn the forests, that destroys the watersheds. So you will destroy all this land being able to keep the water and bring it to the rivers. So it's important for water, very important for water. It's interesting. For the watersheds, it keeps the water so that we can keep it. And then on the mountainsides, it doesn't keep the water, there's landslides. So forests and water are very connected. Does anyone have any question about what a watershed is or why? It's a little confusing, but just remember, if you lose the forests, the rivers lose water. And if the rivers lose water, obviously the people have less to drink and the farmers have less for the farms. So forests protect the water. Let's read about the next one. So, Catherine.
Forests can contribute to Kyoto Protocol carbon trading. In a 2008 proposal, Myanmar could earn from $128 million to 1.8 billion from industrialized country if Burma stopped the current of
I know.
466,000 hectares per year, mitigating 32 to 93 megatons of carbon. Dioxide.
That's right, dioxide.
Generated by deforestation. Thus, Burma would get paid by companies not to cut those trees. This is worth more than the trees.
Okay, so in the previous classes we talked about one thing the Kyoto Protocol does under, where's the eraser? You remember that term we use, red? Red. Yeah. Reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation. Okay, so the trees take the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is this stuff. The trees breathe it in. So now there's carbon trading. The basic lesson is companies will pay. If this CO2 is taken out of the air, then that's worth money. A company can buy this carbon. It sounds very strange, but what the Kyoto Protocol does is it gives a price to carbon. It actually gives it, so you can buy this carbon. So if these trees take in this carbon, then a company can buy that and give Burma money, and then they have the right to emit the same amount of carbon. You don't have to understand the particulars, but just understand that the companies are paying Burma not to cut trees. But what's interesting, look how much money they were willing to pay. This is 400,000 hectares. A hectare is a unit of land. So if the Burma does not cut this many trees, this is like this much. A megaton is a unit of weight, so of carbon dioxide. So this much carbon will be taken out of the atmosphere. And a company can buy that for, this is 128 million to 1.8 billion. Compare that to how much the wood is worth. We said the wood is worth 300 million and 200 million. So 300 plus 200 is 500, or 15 billion baht. So what is that, 12 trillion chat? 12 trillion chat. But this could be worth even more than the trees. In other words, they will make more money to not cut the trees. Company will give them money not to cut the trees that's worth more money than the trees themselves. They're actually making more money not cutting these trees than cutting the trees and selling the wood. Do you see? So in some cases, it may be possible for Burma to make money from not cutting trees, because companies will buy the right to emit. These companies are buying the right to emit the amount of carbon taken out. If this is taken out, they are allowed to take in, and companies will pay money for that. So it's this kind of cycle. So just remember the basic point. Burma is getting paid not to cut trees under this kind of plan. and the money they can get may be worth more than the trees. That's good for the government, but sometimes the people cutting the trees need to see the benefit. So, because I think loggers, if they need to get some of this money, or they will just want to cut the trees anyway. So, you have to think about where the money actually goes and what the incentives are. But anyway, the basic point is, under a carbon trading plan, Burma can get money for not cutting trees.
Okay.
What's that? Do you is it? It's confusing. I know it's very confusing. I mean, one thing is because where does the money go? In this case, maybe it goes to the government. They're paying the government not to cut the trees, but the people making money from cutting the trees are loggers, like, or the villages maybe. Yeah, if they're illegal, the MTE. Yeah, and of course, if you're illegally logging, you don't care about this money. You're going to still continue illegally logging anyway. So it doesn't stop illegal logging. And maybe the MTE would rather get the money from the trees than this money. But this money's a lot of money. If there was a good plan to distribute that money to people that need it, then that could protect the forests. It's how we use this money they give. But maybe we could use this money to protect the forests. It's a really complicated issue, so we don't have to understand every detail. It's very complicated. But just the companies are paying for the trees not to be cut. They will give money for that, because they get a right to emit, and that makes money for them. Let's read the next thing. So, Neme.
Wood and charcoal in 2005, Burma used 45 million and 3 wood for food, cooking and heating, 0.8 and 3 palm cancer. Each year, people use less 1990, 84%, 2010, 20%. People are using more gas and hydropower, but the population is growing faster, so more wood is used for food and milk. Making charcoal is also important for many religious work. Who is back in over to make charcoal? Many mangroves are lost to charcoal. The government restricts forest land for food and charcoal. 4,500,000 hectares a year and has planned for plantation to provide it.
Okay. Fuel and charcoal. So this means, I think this is, I don't know, cubic meters. I think that's the amount of wood. Anyway, so wood for fuel, cooking, and heating. This means heating your house and using it for cooking. You can burn the wood itself, and you all know what charcoal is? Yeah. You get the wood, you put it in an oven and bake it, and it turns into a black charcoal. So, especially in villages, this is the main source of fuel. So, it's very important for local life. People are using less. Every year, people use less fuel, wood, and charcoal. So, here in 1990, they used 84% of all energy used in Burma was from fuel, wood, and charcoal. And then this year, it's 2010, it was 70%. So people are using less wood for fuel, but the population is rising much faster. So even though people are using less, because the population is rising faster, the more wood is being used for fuel. So every year, more and more wood is used for fuel. So this is just something to know about. And especially when we talked about the mangrove trees, why those are being cut, mangroves are mostly being cut for charcoal. And the government has some, maybe later we'll talk about regulation for something like charcoal, but the government, one measure, the government has restrictions. Like every village can use this much land every year for charcoal or for fuel. And they're trying to grow plantation trees to provide for this. But since every year more wood is used for fuel, it's an issue for them to deal with. So next is, does anyone have any questions about that? Fuel and charcoal? It uses wood, so let's read about ecology.
Ecology. Forests are a home to 1,000 of us, 100 pairs of animals, and they have to stop the spread of disease and pests. Now, which forests produce flavorful herbs, etc.
Okay, so here's some other things. Ecology. Forests are home to, I think, thousands of birds and hundreds of animals. We don't put the 1 in front of it when it has the S. So forests are home to thousands of birds, hundreds of animals, and they help stop the spread of disease and pests. Pests are like insects or something that destroy the farmer's crops, pests or weeds. So forests are very good about stopping the spread. If there's a disease, the forest will stop the disease from spreading or the pests from spreading. So they create a very healthy environment that stops dangerous things from spreading. This is all part of because ecology works as a system. I don't know if someone's taught about how nature works. In nature, all the pieces are connected. So if you destroy one piece, then the other pieces around them will start breaking. The bigger animal eats the smaller animal, like a kind of food chain. And if you took one animal out, then it breaks the whole system. So if forests are part of this kind of connected system. So if you break the forest, then other pieces will start to break, and then you'll get more diseases that will spread because the forest can't stop them. You'll have more pests that will go because the forest can't control them. So forests are part of an ecology system that's connected. And then things like non-wood forest products, or just useful products. Forests have many useful products, more than just the wood. You can get food from them, herbs. You know what herbs are?
Yes.
And fibers, bamboo. I mean, there are many things you can get from forests, so they're very useful to communities. So these are the things. So this was a list of things that forests are good for. Money, the selling of the trees, ecotourism, protecting the watersheds, carbon trading as a source of money, fuel wood and charcoal, ecology, non-wood forest products. So let's look at forest land actually in Burma. So Mudipa, let's read about the forest land in Burma.
Forest land in Burma. There are 3 types of forest. Closed, heavily forest, more than half the land. Open, 19 forest, less than half. And other which mean discrete forest.
Degraded. Okay, so we have these 3 categories. There are many different kinds of trees. I forgot, I was going to put a picture of the different kinds of trees, but like up in the north in Kachin, you have like the mountain trees and evergreens. And then down south, you have more like the teak trees and this kind of what's called deciduous trees. But there are many different kinds of trees, but these are the categories. You have very heavy forests, which are called closed. And that means more than half of the land is covered by the forest. Then you have the open forests, which means less than half. So it's a very light forest. Do you see between a heavy forest and a light forest? Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, it's like this is more than half the land is forest, and this is less than half the land. And then we have this other category, which usually means, can you cover that? This other category is usually this kind of situation, where it's this kind of situation where it's mostly sick trees, sick and degraded trees. So they call this other category. It's like, it's hopeless. This can never grow back into a healthy forest now. It's just kind of hopeless, sick trees. So we have statistics on these different kinds of forest types. So let's read about the statistics. Asan.
Statistics are not known with certainty. Some say the percent of foreign land is anywhere between 30% to 86% to 46%. Government statistics are criticized as too high. Independent groups say it is around 36%. All statistics show deforestation, that the percent is getting less over time. The increase in other forests is not good. It means good forests are turning into bad ones.
Okay. So one issue with measuring the amount of forest in Burma is there are many different statistics. And the government will say, sometimes you see government reports and they'll say 50% of Burma is forest, which is a very high number. And Burma still has the most forest in Southeast Asia. But sometimes the government will have statistics that are more than what's actually there. And maybe one reason is because if the government says there's more forest land, the government has more cover. It's easier for it to cut more trees. You remember we'll talk about it later, but the MTE is the one that has the monopoly on being able to cut trees in Burma for the government. So if the government says there are more trees than there are, the MTE is allowed to cut more. So that's why many government statistics will say there's like 50% or 60% of forest land in Burma, which is actually much higher than probably independent groups say it's more like, somewhere around 36%, 30 or 40%. So 10% lower than what the government's saying. But all the statistics are showing deforestation. Every year the forest cover is going less. And the other thing it's showing is the change from closed forests to these other forests. And that's bad because what that means is it's not just that you're losing forest land, it means the good forests are turning into bad forests. And the reason they're doing it is because that picture I drew on the board behind this, remember? If you start cutting the healthy trees, the next generation will have more sick trees. And then every generation will be more and more sick trees. So you're having healthy forests that are changing into sick forests over time, that's called degradation. You have the deforestation where you lose the trees, and then you have degradation. Where's the word? Somewhere was that word. Degraded forest. Degraded is forests that are full of these sick trees. So not only do you have deforestation, losing trees, but you have degraded where healthy forests turn into sick forests. All right. So I have a chart to show that, which looks really confusing, but this is just, these squares here are supposed to be colored. We're going until, what was the time we're going to again? 10:30, great. So some of these squares are supposed to be colored, but it's very hard to see for this outline. But these are blue, lightly blue. These are the ones I wanted to look at. So here we have the closed forests, open forests, and the other wooded land, which are the kind of sick, degraded forests. So what I just wanted you to see is the change over time. And then this is the percent of all the forest land. So you see that's 100%. So in the beginning, the closed healthy forests were 41%. This is in 1990 to 2000, 41%. And then 1990, 41%. In 2000, 38%. And then in 2005, 36%. So the healthy forests are going down by this much percent every single year. And then this is the change, 4.4 down. And then from 1990 to 2005, it went down 12%. So, and then open forest, very similar, from 14% to 13% to 13.7, went down 5% over this time. Okay, so but let's look at the other wooded forests, which is the sick, degraded forests. That went from 15%, and then later it was 16%, and then 17, almost 18%, and it actually went up almost 15%. So you can see the healthy forests every year get less and less and less, and then the degraded sick forests every year are getting more and more. So that's what I wanted you to learn from this chart. And then other land, we won't worry about that. So anyway, so so you can actually see the healthy forests are going down, they're getting degraded, and the sick forests are going up. Do you understand this chart? I just wanted you to focus on the blue parts. Okay? If I go fast over something, I want you to say if you don't understand something, because this is a little technical. Go back. Okay. But cover that up for just a second. I mean, the basic thing I want you to see is just this picture. Healthy forests, how healthy forests turn into sick forests. When you cut down a healthy tree, it can't drop seeds. And then, but you do not cut down the sick trees. So in the next generation, only the sick trees will drop the seeds. You're leaving them more. So then the more sick trees you leave, the more seeds they drop, then they will just have more and more sick trees in the next generation. So this is how healthy forests turn into degraded forests. This only happens when you overcut. You do not allow the healthy trees to regrow. You're supposed to let the healthy trees regrow and not cut this until 30 years later. You let the healthy trees regrow, so you always have healthy trees every year. But if you cut too many healthy trees too fast, you will only leave the sick trees, and only the sick trees will regrow. That's how a healthy forest turns into a degraded forest.
So, teacher.
Yes.
Only a healthy tree can grow a new healthy tree.
Yes.
So sick tree can grow a new sick tree.
Yeah, this is because I'm using the term sick, but it's genetic. The genetic quality. I'm sorry, I use the term sick is a bad term. I'm sorry. Genetic quality. So this is not talking about a disease. This is talking about the DNA. The DNA of the tree. Small trees, small wimpy trees will drop seeds and it will grow a new small wimpy tree. It's the natural selection, this theory? If you leave only small trees, they will only grow more small trees. And the big healthy trees grow big healthy trees. But if you cut all these down, their DNA is not there for the next generation. The healthy DNA, the healthy DNA goes down every generation, and then the bad DNA goes up every generation. That's how this happens with overlogging. When you cut too many, the purpose of sustainable logging, the main purpose is to protect the DNA. You're not just protecting the trees, you're protecting the healthy DNA. We need to allow the healthy trees to regrow, because then they are holding the seeds for the next healthy trees in the next generation. So it's not just protecting the trees, it's protecting the DNA inside the trees so that you have healthy big trees every generation. This is the key to sustainable logging. We need the healthy trees to regrow, to protect the DNA. If you cut down too many of the healthy trees, you'll only be left with the bad DNA trees, the small trees. And then they start cutting these. Then they'll start cutting the bigger of the small trees, and now you're leaving even the smaller small trees. So every generation, if you cut too many trees, it gets worse. Because now if you cut all these healthy trees, now you're just left with the sick trees. What are you going to take now? Now you're taking the biggest of the sick trees. Do you see what I mean? Now you're taking the biggest of the bad DNA trees, so now you're leaving even worse DNA. So every generation it gets worse. Every generation that you do not protect the DNA, it gets worse, and you're leaving worse and worse DNA for the next generation. So we're not just protecting the trees, we're protecting the DNA also. And that's what this chart that I was showing, that's what that's actually showing. These are the healthy good quality forests. Every year they're decreasing. And then these are the degraded forests that have bad DNA trees. Every year that's increasing, going up. So it means deforestation is when you just cut all the trees together and leave bare, just bare land. But there's also degradation, which is when a healthy forest is replaced with a poor forest, poor quality. And remember at the beginning I said every year the value of the wood is getting less. That's because of this too. The value of the wood is getting less every year too. And they're cutting more trees, but the value is getting less and less every year. The more trees you cut, the lower the value goes. So we want to pull these back together. We want to cut less trees and increase the value back to protect the DNA. We want to bring this back into alignment, which is called sustainable logging. So we're going to talk about how to do that. There's a plan you can do to protect the trees and the DNA and the healthy forests that we're going to talk about. But it's not happening now. I just wanted you to show the problem now. Okay. So let's talk a little more about the forest though. So Rebecca.
All forest land is owned by the state. In state control land in ceasefire area and conflict area, ethnic group control the forest. Land may be given as concession to private company or
Private.
private company or joint venture with the MDE, but it's still state-owned. A very small percentage is given to village as community forest.
Okay. So this is the basic. All forest land is owned by the state. But this is in state-controlled land, of course. If you have a ceasefire area or a conflict area, then the ethnic group will be in control of those forests. Which is another problem we'll talk about later in maybe one of the groups. So the state can only control the land that it actually owns. For the border and ethnic areas, they have to have different regulations. Okay, so even though the state is owned by the state, forest land owned by the state, so the MTE technically has a monopoly. Only the MTE is allowed to cut trees in the state land, but practically the MTE does have, they're not technically called concessions. I use the word concessions, but they're not technically concessions. But the MTE has joint ventures, which is the MTE will work with private companies, but it's still state-owned. And then some percent will go to villages as community forests, which is something we'll talk about later. But the basic lesson here, all forest land is owned by the state, and the MTE has the monopoly. Only the MTE can cut the trees, but the MTE does work with private companies. So now let's look at the timber industry. Where does the money come from? How does the timber industry actually work? So Johan, let's read about the timber industry.
Timber industry, where does the money come from? Myanmar produces 1.1 million tons of teak and hardwood annually. Export about 0.8 million tons and US dollar 400 million, while Malaysia produces 0.3 million tons of timber and US dollar 6 billion. For wood product exports, 40 times more. This means that Myanmar enjoys only US dollar 500 per ton, while Malaysia benefits by US dollar 20,000 for every ton on average. It is not surprising because most of Myanmar's wood-based businesses are operating as low tech industries like sawn mills. Burma does not have high-tech industry, furniture, etc. because investors are uncertain about supply of timber. they build silver with easy investment like sawmills.
Alright, and then Chroman, let's read these two things.
Farmer importance more than its produce. 85% of farmer turnout is put output. 12% is sown. Only 3% is value added. Processed wood. Doesn't farmer reach more about processing, not just exporting.
Okay, so do you remember I used that term life cycle analysis where we talk about, with the mines, we talked about it from the mining to the refining to making whatever gizmo it is. It's a very similar thing for trees. You cut down the trees and you have the round logs, then you saw them with sawmills, that will cut them into boards, and then you have the third where you have the processors where they make furniture or houses. They'll make houses, construction, or they'll make furniture from them. So there are these three levels: the round logs, the sawmills, and then the furniture makers, the processors. So what we learn about Burma is 85% of every... Okay, well, first of all, Burma imports more than it produces. So most of the things like furniture and construction wood that are made used in Burma, it imports. It does not use its own wood to make furniture. It will just import the furniture from other countries. And then 85% of Burma timber exports are logs. Most of what Burma gives to other countries that it makes money from are just the logs, only the logs. They cut down the logs and they just sell the logs to another country like China or Thailand. And then those other countries will turn the logs into furniture or whatever. 12% is sawn. Sawn means the sawmills. They change the logs from the round log into the boards to use. Only 3% is value-added processing. So only 3% of Burma's timber industry is things like making furniture or adding value to the wood. So, but we compare that to Malaysia. So Malaysia makes a lot of furniture. And the difference, you can see this. So what was it? Myanmar, so 1.4 million tons of teak and hardwood. So Myanmar, 1.4 million tons of the wood. And then Malaysia, 0.3 million tons. So this is how much Myanmar is producing. And this is how much Malaysia is producing. So Burma, 1.4 million, and then Malaysia, 0.3 million. But now look how much money they're making. Yeah, Burma is only making 400 million, while Malaysia is making 6 billion. 40 times more. So Burma is cutting, 3, 6, 9, 12. So almost 5 times. Burma's cutting almost 5 times as much wood, but they're making much less money. Much less money for the same wood. So Burma is making $500 per ton of wood. So for every 500 tons that Burma cuts of its trees, Burma will make $500. But for Malaysia, for every ton that it makes $20,000 from the same ton. Do you understand? Yeah. You have 1 ton in Burma, 1 ton in Malaysia. For Burma, it makes $500. For Malaysia, it makes $20,000. And the reason is because Malaysia is using most of its wood to make higher value added. It's turning it into furniture or some kind of, so many different wood products, and then it will sell the furniture or the higher value wood products themselves. That's what Burma is not doing. That's what Burma maybe should be doing, because most of it's just selling the logs itself. And the logs, maybe you learn this with the mining example too. With the whole life cycle, you have the mining and the refining and the processing. Where does, if this makes so much money, where does most of the money go to? So in Malaysia's example, they have the cutting and the sawing and the producing. Most of all that money stays in Malaysia. For Burma, we have the cutting, the sawing, and the processing. But most of this money, the sawing and the processing, is in the other country. This is happening in China's keeping this money. Burma only gets the money for the cutting. So if Burma could be smart, we would try to invest in processing in Burma so most of the money stays in Burma from the logging. These are Burma's trees. This is your natural resource. So you want most of the value for your natural resource to stay inside your country. And that's one reason, is to invest in the processing. So I took this quote from an article. It said, "This is not surprising because most of Burma's wood-based industry is low-tech, like sawmills." So the reason it gave, why is it only investing in something like a sawmill or cutting? Why is it not making furniture? And so the reason in this article that I read is that it doesn't have higher tech industry because the investors are very uncertain. They're worried about the supply of timber. So if you make furniture for a living, you need to make sure you can get wood, enough wood to do your job every year. And then this article said the investors are worried that maybe some years they won't get as much wood. They're worried about the wood supply because there's so much illegal logging and because the government has a hard time controlling the logging. The investors are worried about making something like a furniture development. Because it's a lot of money to invest, they worry about making their money back. But like a sawmill takes much less money. You don't have to invest as much money to make a sawmill, and the labor is very easy. It's very cheap labor. So you don't have to invest very much money to make a sawmill. You have to invest a lot of money to make furniture. Did you learn with the finance, when you taught about finance, about risk? The more risky something is, the less money you want to invest in it. The more risky something is, the safer something is, the more money you want to invest in it. Because logging is very risky, investors only want to invest a little money. So, because they don't want to put it at risk. So a sawmill is very cheap to process. You don't need, it's very easy labor. So you can get a lot of sawmills. It's harder to get furniture. So what this means is government reform. If we reform government, there will be more certainty. People will know that they will always have a good supply of wood. If there's good government regulation, then there will be more certainty that you can be logs. If there's more certainty, then investors will invest more in higher processing, in things like making furniture, and they will make more money. So good government leads to more certainty, leads to better investments, like furniture making. And then if there's more furniture making, Burma will keep more value added.
What is sawmill in
It's here they have the log here, and then it's like this kind of thing. You push it through, and then you're left with this. You're left with boards, sawmills. It's very cheap labor because all the workman has to do is just push the logs. So very cheap labor. Whereas a furniture maker, maybe you have to spend years and years learning how to make furniture. So it's very expensive to make a furniture making. But a sawmill is much easier. You're just very cheap labor and cheaper parts. But only 12% is sawn. So even Burma has sawmills, but only 12% is the sawmills. 85% of the timber industry in Burma is just the logs. They're not even selling the boards. 85% is only the logs. They all give this directly to China and Thailand. China and Thailand and India are taking the logs directly from Burma. Then 12% Burma will actually saw. A lot of this will stay inside Burma. This isn't for export anyway. Most of the sawed wood is for people in Burma. And then you have something like the furniture makers, hire, that's a chair. and that's only 3% of exports. So 85% is just the log, 12% is the forest, only 3% is the value-added processing. So that's why Burma is making so little money from the same wood, and Malaysia is making so much more. So there's a picture to show that. This may be, okay. Is this very small to see? Can you see these numbers? So this is export and import. So the number here is how much Burma exports. You know export, you have inside your country, you sell to other countries. Imports, how much from other countries that you bring into Burma is inside this parentheses. And then this is production. Production is how much Burma makes. Consumption is how much Burma uses. So what was production? What was production again? Yeah, this is how much Burma makes of it, produces. And then consumption? How much you use. Okay, good. Okay, so the first one here is wood fuel. Fuel. So we said charcoal and wood fuel, I said before. So this is the production, this is the consumption. It's the same. So Burma produces all the fuel that it uses. Fuel was like charcoal or wood for heating your home. So all the fuel wood that Burma uses, it produces its own. Most of it is villages doing it for themselves. The self-sufficient. So they don't export or import any. So that was the wood fuel. The next one we have here is industrial roundwood. So that's this, the round wood, the actual logs. So Burma's producing 4,000 some units of wood, and then they're consuming 2,700. So of the wood they're cutting, about half the wood that you're cutting, the logs, you are using about 2,000 inside of Burma. So the rest of this will get exported. So that's why this much is getting exported. So do you see, this is how much wood you're producing of the logs. This is how much you're using inside of Burma, and this is how much you're giving to other countries, like China, India, and Thailand. Now this is the sawn wood. So this is sawn wood, this kind of wood. So this is how much Burma is producing, and this is how much Burma is using, and this is how much it's exporting to other countries. So this is a quarter. This is how much they're making of the round wood, and this is how much they're making of the sawn wood. So it's 1/4, it's 1/4 of it. And then they're using most of that. Burma's using most of the sawn wood and only exporting a little. This is pulp for paper. It's about the same. Burma produces this pulp. Do you know what pulp is? This is paper. Paper comes from wood. Pulp is the gooey stuff that you make paper out of. It's called pulp. So Burma is making as much as it's using. But here's paper itself. Paper and paperboard. So the actual paper itself, this is how much Burma produces, but this is how much it uses. So that means most of the paper in Burma, you import. Half the paper that you use in Burma, you import from other countries. So you do not make, this is another, furniture was one thing, that's a higher value added. Another is paper. So Burma imports half of its paper. And then wood-based panels, which is another thing you can see. I guess this is for like houses. So this is what Burma's using and what Burma's making, what Burma's using, and how much it imports and exports. So just remember these two things are interesting to remember. Most of the wood, a lot of the wood is being exported as round wood. And Burma's importing most of its paper. And then, okay, now here's the difference between Malaysia and Burma for the industries. This is what we were talking about before. So here are different kinds of factories with wood. We have plywood, finger joints, this kind of board, molding, furniture, pencils, matches, and sawmills. These are different things you can make out of wood. What I want you to mostly see is, so this is how much the MTE how many factories are run by the NTE. These are how many factories are run by private companies. So look at this. They're all very, very small. Only, there's only 5 plywood factories run by the NTE. There's only 1 particle board factory by the NTE. There's 14 for plywood. So 14 molding for private companies. But these are very, very small. There's 91 sawmills. The NTE has 91 sawmills. And there are 228 sawmills for private companies. All the rest is roundwood. If wood is not used in one of these factories, then it's just roundwood. But let's compare that to Malaysia. If we look at Malaysia, all these numbers are very high, much higher. There are 176 factories. So Burma only has 19 factories for this plywood. Malaysia has 117 factories for this. Burma only has 43 factories for molding. Malaysia has 174. But this is the big one, furniture. Burma only has 30 furniture factories in your entire country, and Malaysia has 1,700 factories for making furniture. And then 1,000 sawmills. So this is how many factories Burma has in total for higher processing. This kind of stuff, higher processing. Burma has, where's the total? Grand total, 400 factories, and Malaysia has over 3,000. So this is why Malaysia is making so much more money from their wood, because of these processing factories. They have 3,000 processing factories, and Burma only has much fewer. So does anyone have any questions about this? Why Malaysia is making more money? They have more factories for processing. And this is just exporting. Burma is only using half the wood it cuts. The rest of it's exported. And half the wood, half the paper that Burma uses, it imports from other countries. So that's what this chart is showing. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about how wood is used in Burma? This is the same lesson as before. Most of the wood is just the round wood for export. Less is for sawmills, and very little is used for higher processing. But this is where the most money is made. That's the lesson of these charts. But you can actually see the numbers. Yes?
Who tried to connect this information?
How do we connect it to what?
Who tried to collect this information?
Who collected?
Yeah, this is-
Oh, well, the source is the FAO. Source MFPTMA, but the MTC.
Burma
Yeah, that's the Myanmar Timber Corporation. Commission, probably committee or commission. I don't know what this is. Another government. These are so government agencies collected this. This is the Malaysia agency. So this was collected by the government, and then this was collected by the FAO. The FAO is the Forest and Agricultural Organization, so under the United Nations. So this was collected by the UN group FAO, and this was collected by Malaysia and the Burma government.
So can you also talk about the illegal for to do the work?
Yes, we will look at that soon. Yes. So right now we're looking at where the money, the industry, how it's actually being used. I think this may include, when this is exports, I think this includes illegal exports too. Because, I mean, we will look at it, but as I remember reading, this includes the illegal exports too. Because China is still, it's not illegal for China. China and India still register, even illegal imports, even illegal exports from Burma. They're illegal for Burma, but they're legal for China and India. So China and India and Thailand have very good statistics about illegal wood coming in because it's legal for them, and they'll have good statistics. So when you see things about like export statistics, this will include the illegal exports because China and India, the other countries, are keeping good statistics on it.
And if they calculate the Lebanese and root, they also count.
Yes. We will look at that later. Yes, but that's a very difficult. I think I said this at the beginning. Statistics are very hard to get because there's so many fragmented things. When every ethnic group has its own operation, and even inside the ethnic groups themselves are divided, and they have different people doing different groups. It's very hard to get statistics for the ethnic groups. What you do is you get statistics from China, because China will have good statistics about what's coming in. It's very hard to get statistics about what's going out. It's easier to get statistics about what's coming in for the other countries. And then even when they're taking statistics for legal logging, this is what I learned. Even when Burma's taking statistics for legal logging, it's very difficult because they'll have different teams taking local statistics, but they use different, they'll use different measurements. And like maybe one team will measure this border and another will do this border and another one this one. So and then they add these statistics. This is like group A and group B and group C. And when they add these statistics, you don't get the right number because these overlap and C is missing some. They're gaps, so statistics are sometimes unreliable.
Yeah.
They're a good guide to see what's happening, and we can see things like deforestation, more trees are getting cut. We can see the trends, but the actual numbers are sometimes unreliable. It's a problem. But we're going to look at that issue. Okay, let's go ahead and look at, exports. Speaking of, timber exports, roundwood equivalent. So these are exports of the logs. Let's have someone read our information on timber exports. Yantun, yeah.
Timber export, roundwood equivalent, India, 800,000.
This is, I think this is cubic meters. Cubic meters. Yeah. Cubic means, X, Y, Z. So, cubic meters.
And China, 600,000 cubic meters, are the greatest export countries. Over 90% especially China is illegal. United States, say only 3,000 is legal export to China.
Okay. They use this term roundwood equivalent. Roundwood equivalent means the equivalent of this kind of round wood, because sometimes the wood is exported in different forms. They may cut it in different ways, so they just use the equivalent of this round wood. So we have, and then here's a chart over time. The China is the pink. This is China. And then purple here is India. And then Thailand. These are the three biggest, is India, China, and Thailand. So you can see in the mid-2000s, China was really over-foresting. They were logging so much. And then the government started to crack down. Around this period, there was so much overlogging by China that the government really started to crack down. Crack down means to try to stop the logging to China. So it's been going down since then. But today, even today, India and China have about the same amount that are exported. And then you can see Thailand. All right, so yeah, 800,000 for India, 600,000 for China. But the Burma statistics will say only 3,000 is going to China. This is how much is actually going, and this is how much that the statistics say. So that means this is documented. This is what's legal and documented going to China. This is the amount that China is documenting coming inside the country. So it's over 90%. Over 90% of the wood going into China is undocumented and illegal.
What about India? 800,000 is legal.
India is your biggest export. Yes, 800,000. India is the biggest exporter. The biggest country that you're exporting to is India. 800,000. It's the most. And as I understand, most of it is legal. So most of it is legal, and it's your biggest exporter. So when the articles that talk about the illegal logging, they're talking about China and Thailand. usually. I haven't seen any articles about India. So, but India is definitely the biggest exporter for timber. Yes.
What does M3 mean?
M3? Cubic meters. You know what a meter is? A meter is like this. I don't know. Is that like a meter?
3 feet,
Okay.
maybe 3 feet.
Meter cubed. Cubed means x, y, z. So cubed. So meter cubed. It should be this symbol, but I don't know how to make this little 3 above, but it means a box meter of wood. It's just a measurement of this kind of box. If you could change these trees into, measure them by boxes, this is how much. So this would be 800,000 of these boxes, meter boxes of the round wood, and 600,000 of these boxes. That's the meter cubed. Yes.
Every year is different, right?
Yes, every year is different.
But in the paragraph, you said you sing like the same every year.
This was this is either 2010 or 2011. I'm sorry, I didn't put the year. This is what we expect, right? This is the average right now, which is also similar to here. This is the average for like the last 2 years. So, and that we can expect for this year. We can expect this year to be in this range. Right, but every year is different. The last couple of years have been very similar to this though. Also because the statistics, the articles I've read, the statistics haven't been computed for 2011 yet. So this is from 2010. That's the earliest I can get statistics. I can't find statistics for last year yet. So, but maybe we can see a trend. I mean, every year China's getting less because the government's trying to crack down to stop the illegal logging. From after this, I mean, this is a nightmare situation. When the government saw this, you know, it panicked and it tried to slow the over-logging and to crack down some more. And India looks like it's increasing. So maybe India's being rewarded for having legal logging. I don't know. All right, so is this our break? Let's have a break.